This is MFG Out Loud. Courageous conversations about sales and marketing for today's manufacturers. With your hosts, Ray Zaganto and Allison DeFore.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another podcast episode of MFG Out Loud. We're so glad you're here. We have a special guest today. He is a #1 best-selling author, speaker, and the president at Achieve Next, where they make connections that count. And, you know, he's known in the industry as the leading expert on the power of business relationships, which are important now more than ever. He speaks for companies and organizations all around the world with a client list that's a who's who of Fortune 500 companies. He's an author of several books, which we will link to in the show notes.
Yep. The
most current is The Relationship Engine, which I highly recommend that you pick up. I can't wait to read it. It's a game changer, truly. And the comments and testimonials so far have been incredibly just glowing. So, Ed Wallace, you have the unique ability, and this is not my quote, it's from someone else, to deliver motivation without asking anyone to walk on hot coals. I think that says a lot. So it's a privilege to have you with us today, and I really believe because you're such a relationship builder, it's no coincidence that you hail from the city of brotherly love. So everybody, please, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Ed Wallace.
Oh, wow, Allison. I mean, I don't know. Maybe we should just stop right there.
Yeah, you've peaked.
Drop the mic. I don't have to say anything. That was an amazing introduction. I'm overwhelmed. And, you know, Ray, you can say lots of nice things about me, too. But I know we have to get...
Well, we give good intro here.
Yeah, you do. It's really, you know, it's really, I'm honored to be on MFG Out Loud. It's great to know you, and I've been tracking the work you're doing. Thank you for what you're providing. And again, hopefully I can add in my own little way to that. And you mentioned the city of brotherly love. We actually are nice people here. It's just the Eagles fans give us a bad reputation. And I'm an Eagles fan, so I'm not a bad guy.
Okay.
Oh, well, speaking of love, you know, I know a lot of leaders especially have something that you call relational superiority complex. I think that's where we should kick this off. And they don't even know it, right? They think that they're a lot better than they really are. I think a lot of us do. And we think that our relationships at work and with our colleagues, vendors, customers are stronger than they actually are. So I thought we would kick this off by asking you, what do you think is the biggest misconception that leaders have about relationship building?
Well, I'm glad you mentioned relational superiority complex, and I actually coined that phrase, so I will take full credit for that. And here's the thing. Every business owner I speak with, every CEO, every VP of sales says, my business is built on relationships. I go, great. What do you do about that? Well, we just hire great folks who are great at relationships. And that's maybe 15, 20% of any workforce if they're lucky. So they have this claim, and they believe that relationships just need to be innate. And we're going to find those golden people who make people smile and have charisma. But there's a lot of really smart people who are great at relationships. There's a lot of introverts who are great at relationships because they're intentional. And I think that's the key thing. I think intentionality from a strategic level. What are we doing strategically about these great relationships we have? What are we doing strategically to help create skills within our sales team, our marketing team, our service team? How about the people that lead R&D? How are they treating the really smart people who work for them. How are they building relationships? So I think it's innate, which is not necessarily a good assumption, versus intentionality.
And just curious on that point, if it's something that can be worked on, the relationship side of things, it's a skill or a muscle that can be strengthened. Do you walk a line between intentionality and authenticity? Because it would seem authenticity is pretty key to the relationship side of things, right?
Well, yes, right. There's three qualities that go into what I call relational or relationship capital. I like relational better because it feels like it's moving versus relationship is more of a noun.
Mm-hmm.
And there's credibility, and that's our believability.
Mm-hmm.
And if you looked up, if you could picture a Venn diagram, and you had credibility here, integrity here, and authenticity here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting to your question.
That's fine.
We have to be deemed believable
Yeah.
before anybody will do anything with us to trust us.
Okay.
And being ourselves through the process creates relational capital. So we build credibility by asking great questions, by being curious, by understanding the relational GPS, the goals, passions, and struggles of the person we're working with. Anything anybody shares with you, I've kind of uncovered this through all the work we've done.
Yeah.
It's either a goal, it's either a passion, or it's either a struggle.
Sure.
In general, there's no absolutes with relationships, but it's a pretty 99% are there. And it's one way until they say, hey, let's do something together. So you can be the most honest person in the world, but who cares if you're not doing anything with a customer or a colleague or a team member or a board member, whatever that is. So it starts with credibility. That's one way. Then you start doing stuff together. You keep your promises. That's integrity. And then authenticity. And my favorite comment about authenticity is just be yourself. Everybody else is taken. Right? And when they collide in that Venn diagram, that's when you form this value that I call relational or relationship capital.
That's interesting because being a reformed sales guy myself, on the relationship side of things, sometimes you do get caught up into the myth of, I'm just going to make them like me and they'll buy stuff. And it's the really successful people I can point to in my career might not have been the most dynamic, but boy, they had process, they had intentionality, they had curiosity, all of those things, and they constantly worked at it.
And you mentioned process and like, how can you stay authentic with the relationship process? So let me ask Allison this question. Do you have processes for most things in your life?
Yes.
Like when you get up in the morning, you have a process?
Yes.
If you're going to buy a car, do you go through a process?
Absolutely.
If you're going, to set up these podcasts, you definitely have a process. I saw it. It's fantastic. Okay. Ray, same with you. So why not a process for relationships?
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, when I was writing the very first book, I'm thinking, wow, process for relationships sounds manipulative. It sounds like, we're gonna con this person into liking us.
Right.
But let's think about a business relationship. We've got to find something in common. That's what we're doing just naturally. So that's part of our process. We are now credible and we start doing some stuff together so we get a chance to display integrity and trust. Yeah, that's kind of what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
When we're together, time is used effectively. It's purposeful. Yeah, it's kind of happening. And then we help each other. Well, I just wrote that down. That's what we all just do. I just wrote it down. We have a tool called the relational ladder, and it's how you take acquaintances to peers to advisors. And again, it's nothing more than what human beings do in business. We just formalize it for our customers and for the world so they can say, yeah, why not a process for, in fact, it's kind of respectful to have a process for relationships. So you're not offering help way before they even like the gel in your hair, right? I mean, hair jokes, Allison. Sorry, we got Ray on here.
Mustache wax.
That's pretty good. I can't do that.
You could if your wife let you. So, that's my secret. That is
So
awesome.
I hope that covered that for you.
That did. You know, one of the that kind of goes along with, and I don't know if these are the some of the same things, but becoming intentional or masterful at building relationships. Is it that credibility, integrity, authenticity, or are there other elements that go into that?
Well, I threatened to tell a story when we were prepping, and I it's going to take a few minutes, but if you're still okay with that,
Yeah.
I think this story says it all, and it'll answer a lot of your thoughts on this. So I'll take you all back to when I started in sales in 1990, and I'm a CPA by education. And I'm in recovery, Ray. Just
one step at a time.
The first step in the 12 steps of accounting recovery is to take a job in sales. And the company I worked for was here in Philly, and they gave me a territory in the Midwest. So I had Chicago, Ray. Yeah. I didn't have the West Coast, Allison, but I had Chicago. Mm-hmm. And I had Minnesota and Wisconsin and all the Midwestern states. So I had to get on an airplane every week. And so I set up a schedule where I would leave my house on a Tuesday morning at 5 a.m., take a taxi to the airport, come back Thursday afternoon, have Friday to catch up on everything. And I was doing that every week. The reason I left at 5 a.m., our first son, Brett, who, believe it or not, is 30 years old today.
Oh, my goodness.
Right? We're going out for his party as soon as this podcast is over.
All right.
So I just time-stamped it for you, Allison. Sorry.
All right.
So I would take a taxi and try to get out of the house before he and Laurie would be disturbed, because he was just starting to sleep through the night. Laurie's my wife. Still is my wife. So I would take the Bennett taxi cab service every day. So picture, this is 1990, a big white taxi cab with the Bennett logo on the door, like a green logo, Bennett taxi service. So I'm waiting for the driver. I get distracted, and the driver rings the doorbell. I sprint to the door. I give him the high sign. He doesn't ring again. And I pause, look up at the ceiling. Laurie's asleep. Brett's asleep. I'm off to a great start. Gently close the door behind me. As I'm approaching the Bennett cab, I notice it's not the Bennett cab today. For some reason, this guy showed up in a London taxi, which in Philly or just about anywhere is pretty cool, right? Yeah. And the wheel was on, the steering wheel was on the U.S. side, and he's holding the door open for me. You see the door's open there. It's beautiful interior, and no driver had ever done that. No driver. They would blow the horn or they would disrupt the baby. And as he closed the door behind me, and was coming around, I noticed several distinctive things besides the fact that it was a London taxi in Philadelphia, which was pretty distinctive. I noticed it was really clean. Ever ride in a Chicago cab there, Ray?
In a hazmat suit, yes.
How do you feel, right? You got to take a shower when you're finished, and don't touch the door pockets. Now, in 1990, there's no hand sanitizer in the door pockets, right? There's no hand sanitizer anywhere. So you touch the door pocket, it's like, oh gosh, for the next 30 minutes. So the other thing I noticed was no music, no dispatcher. We had dispatchers back then. I assume if we had iPhones back then, this guy wouldn't have had one on. A little plastic bottle of water on the seat right next to me. Mm-hmm. I think he invented Uber before Uber happened. He comes around, he gets in, he extends his hand across the front seat and introduces himself. He says, "Good morning, Ed. My name is Max. How you doing today?" And I'm reaching for this fella's hand thinking, wow, how did he get my name? And we proceed to the airport. On the way to the airport, he learns an awful lot about me. He learns about my goals and aspirations in sales, my accounting recovery period. I'm failing at sales, thinking about going back to the dark side, back to accounting. I'm sure I'm alienating half of your listeners. He learns about our infant son, Brett, how important it is for the baby and mom not to be disturbed when he comes in the house in the morning. And here's what he was really great at, and this gets to credibility. He was really great at asking the next question, aligned with the person in the taxi cab. So here's the way the first ride went. And by the way, we talk about virtual relationships today. Our entire relationship over the whole period of time, 3 or 4 years, was the back of his head, his right hand, and his eyes in the rearview mirror. We never went to lunch. How many referrals did he get from me? You don't have to be in the room to create a great relationship. So what do you do, Ed? I'm in sales. What do you sell? Software. We do that in the Midwest. Typical questions, right? Here's his fourth question. Do you have a sales territory yet, or do you sell to named accounts? Are you more of an account manager? What do you think, Ray? I'm thinking when I hear that question from a taxi driver.
He's done his homework somehow. That's he hasn't been a taxi driver his whole life.
It got my attention, right, Allison? It got my attention. I have a territory. Well, tell me about your quota. My quota? Well, I've got one. Well, how is it constructed? Constructed? What do you mean? Well, what percentage of your business comes from new customers? What percentage comes from existing customers? Are you a hunter or a farmer? And hunting and farming was not mainstream sales training yet. And he came up with these terms.
Yeah.
I'm like, who is this guy? So I said, well, I'm supposed to be a hunter. The cupboard's kind of bare on that front. And on the farming side, I haven't figured out the customers yet. He interrupted. He said, I bet you those existing customers are more profitable for your business. Yes, they are, Max. And on and on and on. I'm sharing more and more this cab driver who's an awful lot about life, business, and sales. We get to the airport. The half an hour goes by in a flash. I give him a great tip. Max, that was awesome. See you next Tuesday at 5 a.m. And he was always smiling. If you can picture like a Norman Rockwell-looking guy with a cab hat on, right, in his 60s, he said, I'm really sorry that I can't take you next week. Now, I just handed this guy a really good tip, and he can't take me next week. I said, well, 5 a.m., what's right? He goes, well, I have a lot of fares. I have a lot of friends, and they normally need to wait a few weeks so I can work them into the rotation. The rotation? This is a $40 ride to the airport. Anybody can do this. The rotation? I'm like, you're kidding, right? I said, I must have offended you or something. No. It just takes some time. I said, all right, when are you available? Who's the customer here, Ray?
Yeah, right? It's crazy.
I said, wait. He pulls out a paper calendar. He starts flipping through the pages of his paper calendar, right? He's flipping through the pages. He puts his finger on a Thursday. My schedule was Tuesday, Thursday, not Thursday, Friday. It's the Thursday of Labor Day week. I'm coming out to Chicago, busiest travel weekend of the summer, and I'm supposed to get there on a busy Thursday, leave on a busy Friday. When he offered it, what do you think I said?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, something's going on here. Yeah. I'm in.
Yeah.
He wrote it down. He went his way with mine. Fast forward 3 weeks. We're almost done the story. Baby's asleep. Mommy's asleep. Max appears at the screen door. What do you think he did not do this time, Allison?
Didn't ring the doorbell.
Gently tapped on the screen door. He listened, he remembered, and he cared about the answers. And I really believe, especially now, customers, colleagues are looking for thoughtfulness.
Yes.
They're not looking for aggregation of things and expand. They're looking for someone just to be thoughtful with me. We learned in kindergarten to listen and remember. Max demonstrated he cared about the answers. How many people, and I'm asking this rhetorically, do you think were in the cab those 3 weeks? He spent a half an hour with an obscure sales rep. He remembered the one most important thing. Geez, don't wake up this guy's baby. He connected to a concept that I shared a minute ago called relational GPS. So if your listeners leave with anything, they'll certainly like Max, but they leave with anything. All you've got to do is ask questions and write it down, type it down, however you do things, right? Put GPS vertically on a page. Oh my gosh, Ray just shared a goal with me. That's something I can store away for the next time, or I can explore further this time. Or this customer just shared a struggle with me. According to that Wallace guy, when a customer shares struggles, that's a good thing. I'm believable, and they think they trust me that they can share a struggle, and maybe I can help them. I'm not that smart. This is not rocket science, right? It's all the simple things. I just wrote a few books and wrote them down. We all know this stuff is important, right? It's just amazing. I just sold the business, though, because of this. So it must be really good stuff. So I'm doing the interview this time. Max, who sits in your car every week? Why did I have to wait 3 weeks? Who are these people? And Max was actually born in the Midwest in Indiana. He was a humble guy. Max, all right, tell me who. I had to pull it out. Okay, a lot of the local executives ride around with me. Who else? Well, salespeople like you, Ed, going back and forth. Well, who else? Well, kids love to ride with Uncle Max when they're going on vacation. He said they're always afraid to fly, and they love getting in the car. I try to make it easier on the parents. And I've become so busy, Ed. I started a tour business for the elderly people in the nursing homes. I'm like, oh, come on. Who are you, right? And I said, well, how does that work? He said, well, I'll take some friends, and he always called his customers his friends. We'll take some friends to the art museum in Philly, the Rocky Steps.
Yeah.
And I said, you're not taking them up there? He goes, no, I'm not taking them up the Rocky Steps. He goes, but we'll go for a tour and some lunch. I'll take some people to the historic district on Sun. I interrupted. I said, Max, you have everything I want. You have a full pipeline. You have a predictable forecast. You know how to budget. You seem to like what you're doing. I want one of those 4 things and I'll be happy. What's the secret to success? And I can still see him squinting in the rearview mirror, holding his fingers about an inch apart. He said, it's the little things that turn fairs into friends. The little extras, Ed. So I'm like, okay, I'm a literal guy. Is it the London taxi? I'm asking, is it the London cab? Is it the pleasant conversation? Is it the knowledge of sales? Is it the gentle tapping on the screen door? The listening, remembering, caring about the answers? And I listed several more, and he said, yes. Why all of it, Allison? You answered first. Why all of it?
In my mind, it's like deposits, deposits into an account, and every one of those small deposits adds up to create that relational capital, like you talked about.
Exactly. And how do we know what are the right little things? He left no stone unturned. And that was intentional. So it goes right back to my very first point. Max was the greatest developer of business relationships I ever know. I've told this story to 100,000 plus people now. After your broadcast, there'll probably be 1,100,000, right? The million followers you have. So I'll be up to 1,000,001. Aren't you glad you invited me today? Ray's hair.
Hey.
But the whole point is, he created what I call a competitor-proof experience. And we don't do most of us don't do grand things on a day-to-day basis. We're not running countries or companies. We're just being who we authentically are with our customers, with our colleagues, with our friends. How do we make every interaction matter? And it goes back to Max's foundational principle, which was displaying worthy intent. Putting the other person first and seeing behaviors that come back that say, yes, he gets my good intentions. So Max's worthy intent was validated by my referrals. I mentioned that earlier. By my continuing to book weeks and weeks in advance. His calendar continuing to be full. People talking about him. I was giving a speech in Atlanta once to Deloitte, and a partner stood up. I'm in Atlanta. He said, I know the guy you're talking about. I said, good, because people think I made him up, right? And he said he parks the cab at the A. I said, he's at the A and PM mini market, the convenience store every morning. That's where he gets his coffee. So I said, I really wish I could have had this on a recording, right? So we could, but so again, I challenge your listeners, your viewers, when you're thinking about your cab, what's driving your taxi? What are the little things you do? Are you understanding about that person's GPS? Do you have good intentions when you engage with them? Are you in the moment with them? And what do you see coming back? Do they give you extended meeting time? Do they create introductions around their company to extend your sphere of influence there? Do they tell you things that are kind of confidential to help you advance the relationship with whoever you have to meet with next? Those are the behaviors that you're looking for. We call those relational capital gains. We kind of coined that phrase. And they're all behavioral. So we don't have to be psychologists to understand whether somebody really believes in us. And it starts with like, but it really gets to, are they helping me with my goals? So people buy from people. People like to work with people. We generally hear like and trust first. But all of our research indicates that when the other person knows that you've got their goals top of mind, that's when you have a great business relationship. And our goal was to get to the airport, but he created such a great experience around it. We didn't want to get out. We didn't want to get out of the cab.
Well, intention, like you said, is everything. And I think that that's the same way. That's what's driven my business with marketing, right? Is that if your intention is to sell some shit to some people, not really shit, you know what I mean? It's to sell your shit, you're not going to go as far as the person or the company whose intention is to be of service. So be of service first. You'll sell them naturally. That's the way I've always thought.
Beautifully stated. Beautifully stated.
And that's a tough thing for it sounds simple, but I think in business, and hopefully I think this is changing, but I think a lot of people still look at, well, I'm this way at home, or with my family, or with my friends, or at church, or whatever in my community. And then when I get to work, I got to be like this. And my employees are trying to take advantage of me, and if I don't keep an eye on my customers, give them an inch, and oh boy. Mm-hmm. And as soon as when you bring that edge to everything you're doing, you're talk about self-limiting, if not self-destructive, and that's, for some, that's a very hard thing to break, to bust loose of. The customer is not the enemy. Oh my God.
And Ray, you're hitting on a really great point. The whole approach to leadership has got to change, and it is changing. Command and control does not happen in a flat world. It does not happen in a world where the minute something happens around the company, all 10,000 people get it, even though it wasn't intended for all 10,000 people to get it. So it's really more, how do we create a corporate taxi ride of collaboration, of mutual respect. We have all kinds of crazy things going on in the world as we're doing this podcast. And a lot of it comes down to, just being kind to each other, right? And respect and treating, Max treated everybody the way I think he wanted to be treated. And he remains my guidepost, my true north, whenever I kind of deviate, whenever I want to, have a conversation with one of my team that really would go beyond my usual approach. How would Max handle this? What would Max do? And I think we've all had a Max. I'm sure you've had a Max, Ray, and you've had a Max, Alice, and hopefully you've all had multiple Maxes. I just had one at the exact right moment in time. Yeah. But I'm, even today, I'm still calling on a lot of his philosophy. I mean, I'm talking about him on your podcast, right?
Yeah.
Well, I have a question for you. This makes me think of many stories that I have heard from female CEOs and presidents of manufacturing companies. Okay. These are typically, say, the daughters that have taken over, that have worked their way up and take over for dad, and decided to start leading the company the way dad used to. And all of a sudden, they realized, this isn't me. This isn't working for me. I don't feel comfortable. This is not my style. It doesn't feel right. And so as soon as they changed and were more authentic to who they really were and led fearlessly, right, without it's the reason I'm bringing this up is it makes me think of this command versus collaboration kind of thing. So my question around that, I've had so many stories like that told to me. Do you see any differences between the women that you coach and the men that you coach, or is that really irrelevant?
It's certainly not irrelevant. And a lot of what's talked about in business on television about the challenges women face in business is absolutely real. All we have to do is look at the Fortune 500 and see how many women are leading the companies versus men. I think, but going to the succession with a daughter and a father, let's go back to your scenario, because I can riff on the other stuff for a long time. I actually trained a company. I did a women's leadership group once where they hired me because they couldn't relate to the Korean leadership. So there was a foreign issue, cultural issue, and the CEO of the company was a male Korean who hired me and said, you need to help us because I can't figure it out with the guys who work for me. And it worked out really well. When we get to the second generation, no matter whether it's male or female, there's always a credibility challenge for that person. There's always, this is the son, this is the daughter. In fact, that company I worked for 20 years before I started this business, where I started my cab ride, I wound up being there for 20 years and got all kinds of, I had a great career there. It was a succession, father to son. So I saw, and I'm still friends with the son today, and I saw what he went through on almost a day-to-day basis. Not necessarily from the father to the son, but from the people who now he was commanding or managing. So think about a woman, and maybe in a manufacturing, I'm thinking of the scenario, it's kind of a male-dominated plant or whatever, and distribution and all that stuff. I mean, it's 80% men. And outside of HR, you may not see many women. So I think it gets down to, like Ray mentioned, authenticity. She is who she is. Be proud of that. And she learned an awful lot of that kitchen table that nobody else in that company knows, because a lot of stuff gets talked about at that kitchen table with mom and brothers and sisters, and that person has all of that fluency that nobody else has. And I don't know if that is something you beat your chest about, but I think it's something that builds confidence. You understand your business at a visceral level, right? Versus the level that dad ran the business, right? And then I think the other thing is, we talked about the relational ladder. And I think dad's up here with the employees. He's been giving them their bonuses, and he runs the golf outings, and he's the great guy. Or maybe he isn't, but he's the guy. He's been the patriarch. And now here comes his daughter, and if she starts behaving at the top of the ladder, we talked about the steps in the relationship. So we suggest she has to go back to building credibility, and she needs to ask questions and start relationship by relationship by relationship, because that's how her dad built the business. So I don't know. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I think of it. It's definitely. I love the word cultivate. So I feel like it's cultivating each one of those relationships, and like you said, building your own credibility. But I think what I've admired about the women that I've spoken with and heard these stories over and over, the thing that's cool is that they finally figured out that they weren't afraid to own their style, right? And their style was very much not this commanding presence, but more of a intentionally, I think, more empathetic and definitely better listeners. They were more Max-like, if you ask me, than maybe their predecessor. So I find it interesting.
Every study says women are much better listeners. And just for kicks and giggles, right? Have you seen the video Nail in the Head?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
So for your audience, right? Go out to YouTube. It's either Nail in the Head or It's Not About the Nail. And it's it's by professional actors. You'll recognize the guy. It's a male-female, it's meant to be male-female stereotype, right? But it's really, you can tie business to it beautifully. It's like a minute and a half. And again, I think men look at the obvious and try to fix it. Women want to explore and help you understand that it's not the obvious. So I think, you think about it, Dad's been running the company for 40 years. There's a lot of things that need to get fixed. Okay. There's a lot of people that are skating around that company because they know Dad and and they were the good old boy. I work with a lot of family-owned companies. So how does she come in and find a way to fix all that, right? And the basic thing is to ask questions and to really understand that it's not about the nail, right? I'm giving away the video here. It's really about what's inside and what's really driving why this person isn't feeling well.
Yeah. Well, hey, I hate to do this, but we have to wrap up. Hey, do you have any final thoughts or questions?
I do not I do, but if I were to ask one, this would be a 3-hour episode. So I think we're going to have to save it for another time. I had an awesome time listening to your stories and taking notes today, Ed. This was fantastic.
Right. I'm sorry, Al. Great pleasure to be with you both. Thank you for letting me take you on a journey with Max and going off onto some different tangents. Thank you, Allison, for continuing to bring me back.
That's right.
So, well, hey, we can't thank you enough for spending the time with us. And I highly recommend to everyone listening, definitely go check out Ed's book. And like I said, we'll put links in the show notes so that it's one click and it's yours. And if you're not already following him on LinkedIn and on the other social platforms, please do so. If not, you're missing out. So if you're not already subscribed to MFG Out Loud, please do so. And if you get value from this episode today or any other episode, sharing is caring. So we appreciate it if you tell a colleague or a friend to get real already. And Ray, take us out, buddy.
Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. You matter, and we're glad you're here. So please remember, keep manufacturing out loud. Until next time. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to MFG Out Loud with Ray Zaganto and Allison DeFore. You can subscribe and find show notes at mfgoutloud.com.